Good evening. Social studies. Sorry. Good evening, global studies students. It's Mr. Fleming here, back to annotate another document with you. This time around, it looks like we are trying to tackle 2.7 Christianity. This document is a sermon, or a basically a religious or Jesus basically explaining his teachings to his disciples and others that were gathered around that day. So let's go ahead and dig into this, right? Quickly to review: blue highlighting is the dates, yellow is key people, groups, places, pink topic, sentences, or main ideas, and green are diagrams, figures, or data. In addition, we've also added this idea of highlighting at least two of the vocabulary words from the slide deck, and then you need to highlight it in orange and add a synonym. You can write it above or use the the star feature, right? Step 3, as you read, you must write reactions and reflections in the margins, and we will go ahead and get started on that. And then at the bottom, you always have to fill out the chart, and we'll also take a look at that together too. All right. So the event is Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. I have highlighted that in yellow in first century Common Era, which would be the start of like our modern times, right? Common Era. The document is actually the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5:7. I believe the Bible is divided up into Gospels, right? The disciples that followed Jesus around took note of what was going on and then later published those stories in what is called the Holy Bible. So this is from the Holy Bible. You would, if you picked up a Bible, you would find this in there. So I've highlighted that yellow. It's a pretty important part of this, and Jesus is probably a really important part of all of this. So let's read this. It says, "Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and began to teach, and he began to teach them. He said, 'You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.'" So I've highlighted, you are the light of the world, right? You're the representation of this religion, right? And what you do and how you act and how you behave out in public, and how your deeds and what you do every day is a reflection, right? Kind of your glory, right? Of God, of the Father. He's referring to Father in heaven. He's referring to the Father as God. And so he's basically indicating to people, like, if you're living the good life, if you're doing and following these teachings, you basically are going to be, an exemplar for other people to follow, right? I think I wrote this over here. I put a little highlight at the end of that sentence. It says, "This is almost like the idea of leading by example. If you are doing good deeds, or just simply living, if you're simply living by the teachings of Jesus, then you will be a role model for others. When you do not seek revenge, others will notice, and this will make the religion more desirable." All right. I was kind of alluding to something that's mentioned a little bit later about the not seeking revenge. All right. So let's continue. "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." So, I'm not a religious person. I don't have a strong religious background. So I really was kind of maybe struggling with this a little bit. So I think, right, he's saying, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets." I would assume that this is talking about like Jewish law, Judaic law, religious law, and the prophets certainly would be from that. Although the law could also be maybe like civil law, right? Like the Hammurabi's eye for an eye. I mean, in that sense. But I tend to think he's alluding to the religion. Okay. And I think what he's trying to say here is, I've not come to abolish these things. I'm not trying to change. I'm actually just trying to fulfill what we started. right? Like he's going to go on and he's going to list these different things that he's heard about. When he says like you may have heard, well, he's basically indicating like, this is how society is, right? This is how our faith is right now. This is what you've been brought up in. And here I am, I'm going to tell you a couple little different things, right? So let's see what he is going to say. Let's take a look here. He says, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall not commit adultery.' But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his head. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell." So I highlighted, you have heard that it is said, you shall not commit adultery, and you can't really tell it, but the rest of it's highlighted pink too. It says, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." I think that's a main point, right? It's a speaking point he's trying to draw attention to. And I made a comment over here to this that I feel like he's trying to show how his religion or teachings are better than what is currently being used. He seems to agree with not committing adultery, but he adds that layer of sincerity, almost like the giving in secret part, and we'll see that at the end. He's kind of saying like, do the right thing because it's right, not because you're impressing others with your rule following, right? Like he'll mention about hypocrites in the synagogues. They always are talking about when they give their money, they make big mention of it. And I think we all know people, right? Like they do things, and maybe they do great things, but they want attention for it, and they want to be, patted on the back, and they want everybody, and he's trying to, I think, allude to this right now. Like, no, that that's wrong. Like the adultery thing, like you already knew it was wrong when you first started thinking about that other person. Like you were walking down a road that wasn't cool. And then like, instead of just saying, oh, that's okay, just don't do the actual act, right? I think Jesus is trying to say, look, it's those thoughts, right? That are those intentions that are going to get us in trouble in the long run. So that's why I underlined it, and I think that that's what he's trying to say here, and I think that speaks to like why he's trying to do his teachings, right? He's trying to and it also kind of relates back to that prophets and laws. He's trying to make it better, right? He's not like, I'm not changing it. I'm not telling you can commit adultery. I'm just adding to it and adding another layer. Let's see. Oh, the word gouge. That was a vocab word I had rip out, like gouge your eye, rip it out. All right. You have heard that it was said, right? And I highlighted that to tie it into this. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, right? And I think he's alluding, probably all of us can remember from the last unit, the Hammurabi's code, right? An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. Right. So he's kind of saying, don't retaliate, right? Like that's the normal thing we've been doing. That's what we've been doing through millennia. And trust me, we still do it right to this day. But he's trying to tell you, like if this happens, right, it's best just to turn the cheek, ignore it, not necessarily ignore it, but like try to overcome or find out why they hit you on the cheek, right? And he goes on to say, you've also heard that it was said that love your neighbor and hate your enemy, right? But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and good and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous. So there again, I think he's doing a couple things. I think he's trying to like show, like, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That's there. Like, I get that, love your neighbor, but I want to one up the game and say, why are we hating our enemy? What is that solving? And he's going to say to you, for proof, he's going to say, look, the rain doesn't just fall for the righteous, right? Even the wicked or the people who aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, when the rain falls, it hits them too. And our Father, if you're believing in this, is covering us all. So you, as the individual, should probably be like, maybe something's wrong with that fella or that lady or whatever, right? Maybe we need to help them. Why? Find out why, right? What's going on, and you shouldn't, exclude them, because the Father, the Maker, or however you want to frame it, is okay with them, right? Is forgiving them. And you too should do the same, right? And again, it all ties back to that first part, like you are the light of the world. And if you're doing all of this, right, like, that first time someone, sees you not respond to a violent person or someone who did something wrong to you, and you respond completely different, like, oh, what happened? How? I see you did this to me. What's going on with you? People are going to take notice of that. And it's going to be a different experience. And I think that might have been probably part of the draw, right, of this or these new teachings and what becomes eventually this new religion. Okay, and the final thing in the document. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. That was what I was talking about earlier. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So the idea here, again, is do what's right, just for the sake of doing what's right, not to get the attention from your peers, or sometimes we do things just to get attention so that we can gain other things. We have kind of an ulterior motive. He's saying that's not cool either, right? It's all of this stuff. I guess it's like this internal dialect that you have with yourself as opposed to what the rest of the world sees, right? And those two things should kind of align. You shouldn't be one way inside doing things on the sly, and then, when you're out in public trying to make it look like you're one way. And I think that's what he's also trying to talk about here, right? A synagogue, I highlighted, that's a place of worship, right, in the Jewish faith. And those were my two vocabularies. So value. Well, the origin, this was a speech made by Jesus to his followers. Since the religion relies on following the teachings of Jesus, this is part of the religion. Again, he's making a sermon. He's teaching. He's trying to recruit too, right? Other people may have noticed these hypocritical things, right? Humans kind of will tend to key in on that. And so he's speaking to the masses. What's his purpose? He's trying to explain how to modify their behaviors to fit into his new ways of thinking, teaching, right? He's with the examples of the giving and the examples of the adultery, right? He's trying to show you how his framework of thinking is slightly different than what is being offered right now. I say with the adultery point, he is trying to show how his teachings are better, and he is doing the same thing with the love thy enemy part, right? Or pray for those who persecute you. Limitations. This comes from the Gospel of Matthew, so it could be biased. They all support him, so obviously, right? Or some info could be missing. If my history is right, I believe that these were written down much later, right? And then, of course, it's written down, and it's an eyewitness, and anyone will tell you, eyewitnesses sometimes leave things out, or they embellish, or they do other things, right? So purely from a historical standpoint, there was a Jesus, and this would have happened. Just looking at through history, not trying to put any of the beliefs, the other side of it, of the Jesus and the Christianity, which, if you watch the videos and stuff, is the resurrection part, right? There's two parts of the faith. There's the part where you believe in his teachings and living the good life and kind of a book, a guide, and then there's the second portion, right, where we believe that he went to heaven and all that, right? So, limitation, it comes from the Gospel of Matthew, so it could be biased. It was written long after the event, and it's from one point of view. We would have been nice to have heard from a couple other people what was said that day. Summary. Jesus is comparing his way of thinking to that of the Jewish faith, and also to older established laws like Hammurabi's Code. He's trying to say that his new teachings are just a continuation or fulfillment of past idea. He says, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. So I was trying to give you some textual evidence right there. He then gives examples of minor tweaks to old ideas, right? The love thy enemy aspect is an example, as well as the giving for giving's sake. I kind of talked about the idea as we went through here. Questions that I have. Is this the whole speech? Since it seems redacted, right? Meaning up here when you look, he said, and then there's some blank and teaching. So I think there were some words that were in there, right? And I think those were left out. So I would love to see the whole entirety, right? Second question, how big were the crowds? Was this, are we talking an Obama inauguration or like a Trump inauguration, different joke. But really, how big were these crowds? Were there tons of people there? Were there just a small group? And you have to remember that back in the day, I don't know. What would have 100 people be viewed the same as it is today? Like, is that a lot of people? I don't know. And how, let's see, and how many people were really interested to hear this guy talk? Like, was there, a huge, like, was it now, like, when we hear a concert coming to town, like, ooh, Jesus is coming, I'm going to go watch this shit, listen to him speak. So those were some questions. And the other thing, and I'm sorry, if you have me, I'm a little cynical at times, but my question is, why do some Christians seem to ignore the basic teachings of Christ, such as love thy enemy, but claim that they are true followers, right? Like, there seems to be a disconnect there, between those teachings, right? Looking solely at those teachings of, like, don't, pray for those that persecute you, help people, give people, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say, like, if someone's in a lot of trouble and they need a new place to live, like a refugee, you probably would want to give to them too, right? So, just some things I've noticed, and I think that happens in every religion, right? People have what the teachings are, and then sometimes what the people, how it plays out. And so, I hope this helped. I hope it helped you, talking through all of this. You may have some different analysis than I do, which is awesome always. But I hope this is helpful, and have a good evening.